The woman waited until the last of the mourners had drifted toward their cars before she came over to me. She moved slowly, the way people move when their knees have given them trouble for years, and she stopped about an arm's length from where I was standing. The wind off Lake Erie was sharp that afternoon. I had the collar of my coat turned up and my hands shoved into my pockets because I had forgotten gloves at the hotel, and I remember being annoyed at myself for that small failure of preparation, as though gloves would have made any of it easier. "You're Eleanor's youngest," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Mom." She had a paper grocery bag tucked under one arm and a folded piece of paper in her hand. She held the paper out to me, and when I took it, she kept her fingers on it for a second longer than seemed necessary, the way you might hold a child's hand before letting them cross a street alone. "There's a number on the back," she said. "You'll want to call it tomorrow, not today. Tomorrow morning, ask for a woman named Bernadette Crowley. Tell her Eleanor's daughter is finally ready." I started to say something, but she just nodded once and patted my forearm and walked toward a dark blue sedan that had been waiting for her by the cemetery gate. A man in a wool coat was holding the passenger door open. She got in without looking back. The car pulled away slowly, the way funeral cars do, and then it was just me in the wind and the sound of the canopy fabric flapping over my mother's open grave. I unfolded the paper. It was a plain white index card, the kind teachers used to keep on their desks. On one side, in handwriting I didn't recognize, was a Buffalo phone number. On the other side, in the same handwriting, was a single line. "She built it on purpose. Don't let anyone tell you it was an accident." I read it twice. Then I put the card in the inside pocket of my coat where I could feel it against my chest through my sweater, and I walked back to the rental car alone. My mother was a school cafeteria worker, 38 years at the same elementary school in a town outside Buffalo called Lackawanna. She started when I was a baby and she retired the spring before last with a sheet cake in the teacher's lounge and a card signed by the entire staff. She had a photograph from that day on her refrigerator, her in her hairnet and her white apron, holding a small bouquet of supermarket carnations. She looked tired in the picture, but she always looked tired. She had been on her feet for nearly 4 decades. She lived in a 2-bedroom house she bought in 1987 with a 30-year mortgage she paid off 3 years early. She drove a Toyota Camry from 2009 that she serviced every 6,000 miles whether it needed it or not. She kept a vegetable garden in the small patch of yard behind her house, and she canned tomatoes every August like clockwork. She called me on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock and on Sunday afternoons at 3, and she always asked the same 2 questions in the same order. Had I been eating, and had I been sleeping? She died on a Thursday in early March. A clot, the doctor said. It happened while she was sitting in her recliner watching the local news. The mailman saw her through the front window when he came up to leave a package, and he called the police because she hadn't moved when he knocked on the glass. I flew in from Charlotte the next morning. My older brother flew in from Dallas the morning after that. He came alone. His wife stayed home with their twin boys, which he mentioned 3 times in the first hour I was with him, as though I'd accused him of something. He is 42 and he sells industrial HVAC systems, and he has a habit of opening every conversation about money with a sigh, the way men do when they are about to explain something to you that they assume you don't already understand. He called me from the airport on his way in. "So what do we know about the house?" "What do you mean, what do we know about the house? Is it paid off? Did she have a reverse mortgage? Is there anything on it?" I was standing in my mother's kitchen at the time, looking at the row of mason jars on top of her refrigerator, each one labeled in her small, careful handwriting. Tomato. August. Pickles. September. Peach jam. July. I remember pressing my thumbnail against the edge of one of the labels and not answering for a long time. "It's paid off," I finally said. "She paid it off years ago." Okay, good, that's something. We should get an appraisal before we do anything. She's been dead for 36 hours. I'm just saying." He hung up first. He always hangs up first. There were 9 people at the service. I counted them twice because the number felt wrong, too small for a woman who had fed 3 generations of children in that town. My brother sat in the second row and checked his phone twice during the eulogy, which the minister had pieced together from a phone call with me 2 days earlier. The minister called her a faithful servant of her community and a woman of quiet dignity, which were both true but felt like the sort of things you say about anyone whose actual life you didn't know. After the burial, after the woman with the index card, after I drove back to my mother's house and sat in her kitchen with the heat turned up too high because I couldn't get warm, I took the card out of my pocket and laid it on the table. My brother was in the living room sorting through her mail. I could hear him muttering to himself about junk catalogues. "What's all that?" he called out. "Just paperwork." "From who?" "Just paperwork," I said again. He let it go. He always let things go when they involved effort. I did not call the number that night. I sat with the card on the table in front of me for almost 3 hours, and at some point I made myself a piece of toast that I didn't eat, and at some point I started crying for the first time since the phone call about her death, and at some point I stopped. I went to bed in the guest room with the card on the nightstand next to me, and I dreamed about her standing at the kitchen counter slicing apples for a pie. And when I woke up, the index card was right where I'd left it, and the morning light through the curtains was the same grey-yellow it had always been in that house. I called at 9 in the morning. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. "Crowley and Associates." "My name is, I'm calling for Bernadette Crowley. I was told to ask for her. My mother was Eleanor Whitaker. A woman at the funeral yesterday gave me this number and told me to hold 1 moment, please." There was a click, then quiet, then a different voice. Older, steadier. The voice of someone who had been waiting for this call for a long time. "This is Bernadette. I'm so sorry about your mother." "Thank you. Are you in Lackawanna right now?" "Yes. Can you come to Buffalo tomorrow?" "My office is downtown. I'll have my assistant text you the address and a parking pass. There are some things your mother asked me to share with you in person, and I'd rather not begin them over the phone." "What kind of things?" There was a pause on the other end. Not a hesitation exactly, more like a deliberate choice to slow the conversation down. "Your mother was a careful woman," she said. "She made arrangements. I think it's better if I walk you through them face to face." "My brother is here too. Should he come?" Another pause. "I'd ask that you come alone for the first meeting. After that, you can decide who else should be involved." "Your mother was specific about that. I told her I would be there at 10 the next morning." I hung up and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at my mother's bare March garden. The corn stalks from last summer still standing in the back row, because she hadn't gotten to them yet. And I thought about how she had always been a woman who finished what she started, and how strange it was that she had died with the corn still up. My brother was watching a basketball game in the living room. I told him I was going to drive into Buffalo the next morning to take care of some paperwork. He didn't look up from the TV. "What kind of paperwork?" "Estate stuff. Records the funeral home needed copies of." "You want me to come?" "I've got it." "Suit yourself. Pick up some coffee on the way back." Real coffee, not the stuff she had in the cabinet. The office was on the 8th floor of a building near Niagara Square, the kind of building with marble floors in the lobby and a security desk where you had to sign in. The receptionist sent me up. Bernadette Crowley was waiting for me at the elevator. She was probably 70, with white hair cut short and the kind of straight posture that comes from a lifetime of taking yourself seriously. She walked me back to a conference room with a long table and a window that looked out at the city. There was a manila folder on the table and a pitcher of water and 2 glasses. She closed the door behind us. "Before we start," she said, "I want you to know that I was your mother's attorney for 26 years. I drafted her first will. The year you started kindergarten. I knew her, not just as a client. I want you to know that, because what I'm going to tell you is going to be difficult to hear in some ways, and easy to hear in others. And I don't want you to think you were the only person she kept in the dark." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. She opened the folder. The first page was a one-page document I had already seen. My mother's will, the simple 2-page document that left the house and its contents to my brother and me to be divided as we saw fit, the Camry to my brother, the small savings account at the credit union to me. $12,000 and change. "This is the will you've already seen," Bernadette said. "It's accurate. It's the complete record of your mother's personal estate." "Okay. What we're going to talk about now is separate from that. Your mother established a charitable trust in 2006. It was funded gradually over the next 19 years through a series of investments she made beginning in the late 1980s. The trust is a registered 501c3 nonprofit in the state of New York. It has its own board, its own annual filings, its own bank accounts. It is not part of her personal estate. It was never part of her personal estate. You understand the distinction?" "I think so." She turned the folder around so it faced me and slid it across the table. "The trust is called the Lunchroom Fund. Your mother named it herself. As of the most recent quarterly statement, which I received 2 weeks ago, it holds just over $6.4 million in assets." I read the number on the page. Then I read it again. That's not possible. It is. She made $22,000 a year. She made $22,000 a year for the last 15 years of her career. Before that, she made considerably less. The money in this fund did not come from her salary. It came from a small inheritance she received from her own mother in 1986, which she invested over the course of nearly 40 years in a portfolio she managed through a brokerage in Buffalo. She added to it consistently. She lived below her means. She reinvested every dividend. She started the trust in 2006 when the principal had grown to a point where she felt she could begin distributing some of the proceeds without depleting the asset. She has been making disbursements ever since. Disbursements to who? Bernadette flipped to a page near the back of the folder. It was a list. Pages of names, dates, dollar amounts. Tuition assistance, heating bill, January. Eyeglasses for child. Bus pass, semester. Rent, 2 months. Some entries had a child's first name. Some had a family name. Some just had a school year and a category. There were hundreds of entries, maybe more than 1,000. The Lunchroom Fund provides direct assistance to families of children attending free or reduced-price lunch programs in 3 school districts in Erie County, Bernadette said. Buffalo, Lackawanna, and Cheektowaga. The fund pays utility bills, school supplies, transportation costs, sometimes rent or medical co-pays. It's run quietly. It does not advertise. Families are referred through school counselors and social workers. The administrative cost is kept under 3%. Your mother oversaw it personally until about 4 years ago when she began transitioning the operational side to a small staff. I was holding the edge of the table. "She fed those kids during the day," I said. "Yes." "And then she?" "Yes." I had to close my eyes. I had to put my forehead on my hand and close my eyes and breathe through my nose for what felt like a long time. Bernadette did not say anything. She did not slide a tissue box across the table. She did not pat my hand. She just sat there in her chair on the other side of the table and let me have the moment. When I opened my eyes, there was an envelope on the table that hadn't been there before. My mother's handwriting on the front. My name, just my name, in the careful block letters she used when she wanted you to read something with attention. "She wrote this 2 summers ago," Bernadette said. "She updated it twice. The last version is from October. She asked me to give it to you in person, alone, before we discussed anything else. I'm going to step out for a few minutes." She left. The door closed behind her with a small click. I opened the envelope. "If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to tell you in person, and I'm sorry about that. I had a whole plan for how I was going to do it. I was going to wait until you turned 35. I don't know why I picked that number except that it felt grown enough. I should have done it sooner. I should have done it the day you stopped needing me for things and started just calling because you wanted to. I have not been hiding money from you. I have been protecting something that was never mine to spend. The money I started with was your grandmother's. She left it to me in 1986 with a note that said, "Use it for something steady." I took her at her word. I have spent almost 40 years trying to do what she asked. You're going to have questions about your brother. He doesn't know about any of this, and he never asked. I love him. I have always loved him. But I knew very early that he was not the one to carry this. He sees money as something that solves problems. You see money as something that means somebody else is sitting down with a calculator at their kitchen table and trying to figure out how to make it stretch. That is the difference between you and him, and it is the reason I am writing this letter to you and not to him. I'm not leaving you a fortune. I'm leaving you a job. Bernadette will explain the legal structure. The fund has a board, and the board will continue. You don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to do it forever. But I am asking you to be the next person who looks after it. I am asking because I trust you to remember why it exists. The children at the school don't need a hero. They need someone who shows up on time with a sandwich and a clean napkin and treats them like they belong there. That is what I have tried to do for 38 years. The fund is just the longer version of the sandwich. Take care of your brother. He's going to be hurt by this, and his hurt is going to come out sideways. Don't argue with him about it. Just love him through it. He is not a bad man. He is a tired man who never learned how to ask for what he actually needs. I love you. I have always loved you. I called you on Wednesdays and Sundays because those were the slow nights at the school, and because I wanted to hear your voice, and because I never wanted you to feel like you had to chase me. You didn't have to chase me. I was right here, Mom. I read it 3 times. The 3rd time I read it out loud to the empty conference room, in a whisper, because I needed to hear the words in her voice, and I was already starting to forget exactly how her voice sounded, which felt like the worst betrayal a person could commit against their own mother. When Bernadette came back in, she carried 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of me. She did not ask if I was okay. She just walked me through the rest of it, the board, the bylaws, the annual review schedule, the IRS filings, the role of the trustee, my authority as successor, the option to decline the role and pass it to the existing vice chair, the option to dissolve the trust under certain narrow conditions that did not include personal distribution of assets to family members. Your mother was very thorough about that last point, she said. I bet she was. You have 90 days to decide whether to accept the trusteeship. There is no pressure to decide today, or this week, or this month. The fund will continue to operate under the vice chair in the interim. What was my mother's salary as trustee? She didn't take one. She never took one. She covered her own travel expenses out of pocket. I drove back to Lackawanna with the folder on the passenger seat. I stopped at a diner on the way and ordered coffee I didn't drink, and sat in the booth looking out the window at the parking lot for almost an hour. A woman at the counter was reading a paperback. A man 2 booths over was eating a piece of pie with his hands shaking the way old men's hands sometimes shake. The waitress refilled my cup without asking. The whole world was carrying on the way it always did, and somewhere in Buffalo a $6.5 million charitable fund was running itself in my mother's name, and the children whose names appeared on those pages had no idea who Eleanor Whitaker was. And somehow that was exactly the way my mother had wanted it. I did not tell my brother that night. I sat across from him at the kitchen table while he ate the pizza he had ordered, and I let him talk about the appraisal he wanted to schedule and the realtor he had already called from Dallas, and I just nodded and ate my crust and said we'll figure it out whenever he paused for breath. I told him the next afternoon. I sat him down at the same kitchen table and I gave him the short version, the fund, the amount, the structure, the fact that it was a registered non-profit and not part of the estate, the fact that our mother had been running it quietly for almost 20 years. I did not show him the letter. The letter was mine. He was quiet for a long time, longer than I had ever known him to be quiet. Then he said, $6 million. 6.4. $6.4 million. It's not ours. It was never ours. It's a charity, not a savings account. She had $6.4 million. The fund has $6.4 million. She didn't have it. She set it up to be separate from her on purpose. That's the whole point. She didn't. She lived in this house. She lived in this house, and she drove that car, and she had $6 million. It's not ours. Don't keep saying that. Stop saying that. You keep saying that like it's supposed to mean something. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood at the window with his back to me for a long time. When he turned around, his face was red in a way I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. And she made you the trustee. She offered me the trusteeship. I haven't accepted it yet, but she didn't ask me. No. She didn't even mention it to me. No. 20 years. 20 years and not one word. She didn't tell me either. But she picked you. There it was. The sentence underneath the sentence. The thing he had been afraid of his entire life. Finally said out loud at a kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon. In the same kitchen where our mother had stood at the stove making us grilled cheese sandwiches when we got home from school. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing I could think of. She picked me to do the work. That's not the same as picking me over you. That's exactly what it is. He left that night. He didn't say goodbye. He took his suitcase out to his rental car, and he drove away, and I watched the taillights go down the street. And I sat on the front porch in my mother's old wool blanket until the cold made me come inside. He called a lawyer in Dallas the next week. The lawyer filed a notice of intent to contest the trust on grounds that I am not going to bother explaining because none of them held water. Bernadette handled it. The trust had been in place for 19 years. It predated the will. It was filed properly with the state of New York and the IRS. It was watertight. Bernadette had been waiting for this filing for a decade. She told me later that my mother had asked her every single year at their annual review whether the structure was still strong enough to survive a challenge from a sibling. Every year, Bernadette said, "Your mother loved your brother very much." She also knew him. The hearing was held in Erie County in late June. My brother came up from Dallas. He sat at one table with his lawyer. I sat at another with Bernadette. The judge took about 40 minutes to read through the materials. She asked Bernadette 2 questions. She asked my brother's lawyer 1. Then she dismissed the petition. She did it kindly. She looked at my brother before she did it, and she said, "I understand that this is a hard day for you, sir. Grief and money are a very difficult combination. But the structure here is sound, and the law is clear." My brother nodded once. He kept his eyes on the table. We rode down in the elevator together afterward. Just the 2 of us. He didn't speak until we got to the lobby. "I'm going to go back to the hotel," he said. "Okay? I'll call you in a few days." "Okay? I'll call you in a few days." "Okay." He didn't call for 3 months. He called in October on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, which I noticed and did not mention. "How are you?" he said. "I've been better." "Yeah." "How are you?" "I've been worse." We talked for about 20 minutes, about nothing, about his boys, about a leak under his kitchen sink, about a documentary he had watched on submarines. We didn't talk about our mother, and we didn't talk about the fund, and we didn't talk about the hearing. At the end he said, "I'll try to call more," and I said, "I'd like that," and he said, "Okay," and we hung up. He has called 4 more times since then, always on a Wednesday. He has not asked about the fund. I don't think he ever will. I think he is going to spend the rest of his life pretending it doesn't exist, and I think that is probably the only way he knows how to keep loving her. I accepted the trusteeship in August. I have not taken a salary. I do not plan to. I work my regular job in Charlotte, and I fly up to Buffalo every 6 weeks for the board meetings, and I sit at the long table in the conference room where Bernadette first told me the number, and I sign disbursement approvals for utility bills and bus passes and eyeglasses and rent. The vice chair is a retired school counselor named Pauline, who has been with the fund for 11 years, and knows more about how it actually works than I will ever know. She is patient with me. She lets me ask the same questions twice. She reminds me to eat. There is a binder in my mother's hall closet that I brought back to Charlotte with me. It is full of notes in her handwriting. Children's first names, schools, small notations. Owen, 3rd grade, needs winter coat by Friday. Maribel's family, behind on heat, December. Reggie, glasses broke again. Can we just buy 2 pair this time? The handwriting is the same handwriting that wrote out my school lunch notes when I was 7 years old. The same handwriting that wrote tomato. August, on the mason jars. I have started adding to it. Different handwriting. Same idea, same purpose, same small careful entries in the same kind of notebook, because I went to 3 stores in Charlotte before I found one that matched the brand she used. She did not leave me wealth. She left me a list of names and a job and a long line of children I will probably never meet. And somehow, in some way, I am still trying to understand. That turns out to be the most generous thing she could have done for me. If you had a parent who lived small on the outside and big on the inside, who fed people without telling anyone, who paid for things they never mentioned, who built something quiet that you didn't find out about until after they were gone, I hope you will sit with that for a minute. Not all the good in the world is announced. Some of it just gets done. Every Wednesday and every Sunday by people who never asked for credit and never expected any. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me about that person in your life. The ones who lived at a low volume because they were saving their voice for someone else. I read everyone. I'm not in a hurry. Neither was my mother. The work doesn't move fast. It just keeps going. I've thought a lot about how my mother managed to do what she did. And the honest answer is that none of it was an accident. She didn't stumble into $6.5 million. She didn't get lucky. She made a small decision in 1986 to take my grandmother at her word, and then she made that same decision again every single week for the next 39 years. That's not magic. That's character compounding the same way money compounds, one quiet choice at a time, until the total is something nobody around her could have predicted. I used to think the lesson of her life was about generosity. I don't think that anymore. I think the lesson is about discipline. My mother was generous because she was disciplined first. She lived below what she earned. She kept her promises to a woman who had been dead for 40 years. She didn't let comfort or pride or the resentment of being underestimated pull her off the path she had chosen. The lunchroom fund existed because she was the kind of person who finished what she started, who showed up on Wednesdays at 7 and Sundays at 3, who canned tomatoes every August even when nobody was watching. The fund was just the longer version of the tomatoes. My brother is going to spend a long time being angry about a choice she made, and I understand it now in a way I didn't at first. He saw her decision as a verdict on his worth. It wasn't. It was a verdict on his habits. She didn't trust him with the fund because he had never given her any reason to believe he could carry something steady for 20 years without trying to bend it toward himself. That's not a failure of love. That's an observation. The hard part of being loved by a clear-eyed person is that they see you accurately, and what they see has consequences. The good news is that those consequences are not permanent. He can become the kind of man she would have trusted. He just has to choose it the same way she chose her path in 1986, one Wednesday at a time, without expecting credit for it. What I want to leave you with is this. The people in your life who live small on the outside are not failing at life. Some of them are doing the most demanding work a person can do, which is the work of refusing to spend themselves on themselves. That work is invisible by design. You won't see it in a car or a house or a wardrobe. You'll see it in the steadiness of a phone call that comes every Sunday at 3, in the patience of someone who never made you feel like a burden, in the way they showed up for strangers without telling anyone. If you have a person like that in your life, call them. Don't wait until you're 35. Don't wait until next Sunday. Honor them now, while their voice is still something you can hear without straining to remember.